What's going on today, guys? Let's do some knife spelunking. If you're not familiar with that, that is the series where we break down the knives. We dive down deep into there. We explore all the cracks and crevices, and I let you know the pros and cons as I see it. So today is going to be the Microtech Stitch. Fairly simple knife. You may think that a side swinging automatic is complicated. It's really not. There is a coil spring inside there. There are a few things that you really have to do right on an automatic knife, or even a assisted knife with a spring in it, is you really have to make sure that your blade stop is anchored really well. There's a lot of plunge locks because it's a very good design, and we're going to go over that. You can see that actually locks it closed. You can't pull this knife open. It's actually locked closed with the plunge lock. This knife is going to be dirty. I do carry this one quite frequently, more than you might actually expect. I just did the review on it, so hopefully you're coming off that video and watching this. I want to point out some details before we take this knife apart, and I don't think I'm going to be reassembling this knife. We're just going to break it down. I'll show you the internals here. Look how they have actually cut this to adjust. So as this plunge lock slides down, because there is a spring, that's why this is bumped out. You'll see in a bit, there's a spring in here that pushes this plunge lock into the blade. It's a stiff spring. That's why this knife, you can't accidentally fire this. My kids, when they pick this knife up and I tell them to try to fire it, you really have to put some pressure onto that knife. Even grown men, when I give this knife to them, they really have to give it an intentional push, kind of like their dual action here. You really got to push this thing up to fire it. You're not going to accidentally fire an Ultratech in your pocket. I mean, you got to really push on it. It's the same way with this. So it is a safe design. I just wanted to let you see that before. I also wanted to point this out. See how this is the blade stop? Look how well the machining is done here. I'm going to use this as a pointer here. Can you see the ridges across this thing? And then you see how this is rounded here. This wraps around this blade stop. You can see how thick that blade stop is there. Just really well done. Look how the blade has been chamfered all the way around. There's not many sharp points except for the edge. This is a little bit, but not too much, not too bad. So let's break this thing down. Enough flapping your gums, and let's get this thing open. So this is pretty easy. It's a T20 for the pivot and a T8 for the rest of the screws. So how I want to do this is, okay, so this should have a coil spring in it with a piece bent down and poked into the blade, and that's what lets the blade preload. So how I normally tear down knives, I will take the pivot and I will slide the blade out, but we're not going to be able to do that because the coil spring is actually tied to the handle and to the blade. So we're going to have to take all these screws off and then the pivot and pull it all off in one unit. And I actually think it would be better if we just release some of the pressure like that. So it's not quite open, not quite closed. We just have the pressure off. Again, just using a T8, I actually think we're going to have to use 2 here. And I'm sorry if I can't keep this whole thing into frame. You're going to see some thick, beefy screws on this. That is a thick screw. This knife is really well put together, really well designed. I like it a lot. Again, this knife is going to be dirty. When I reassemble this knife, I don't think I'm going to do it on camera, but I will definitely clean it up. I'm just very impressed. You see the build quality here. Look how thick those screws are. They're almost as big as the head. Very nice. That is not like just regular hardware that they got somewhere. They have their hardware machine. That's why a lot of their hardware I'm not sure if it's made in-house. I know the knife is made in the USA, but it looks like possibly they machine their own hardware, but I don't know for sure. And we'll take this T20 and get the pivot off here. A few things I really want to show you on this pivot is how it's a captured pivot. What do I mean by that? It has, look how thick this thing is. It's a captured pivot, being that you can see how this hole is captured on both sides. So as you're opening this knife and closing this knife, the pivot doesn't wiggle around on you and loosen the blade. Very good design. I always like to see that. All right, so here's kind of the unveiling of the knife. And we can see what really makes it tick here. There's that spring that I was talking about underneath the plunge lock. You can see why that pocket is there on the outside. You can see how well that the stop pin wraps around the blade. This is at lockup. Well, lockup because of the spring, and right there's the spring that is actually poked into the blade. There's a few things I want to point out before we show you what the actual spring looks like here. Here's some small details that you may not notice. Look how the pocket clip is milled around here to be flush. Again, attention to detail. Look how they brought the checkering here and then stopped it for the point that it goes into your pocket. Again, attention to detail. I really like that. If this was textured all the way up, this thing would tear your pocket up. I like the way they have recessed to this hardware and then chamfered around there. Just really nice machining on this. Now, while we're talking about the pocket clip, is why I brought you back here. You can see how even the screws are completely flush with that, and they milled the whole back. So this piece of aluminum started a little thicker than this, and it's all been milled down. And then you can see they left a little bit of a pocket here to give the screws a little more to bite into on the aluminum. Aluminum is a little bit softer, so maybe that only allowed them to get 1 or 2 more threads on there, but they took the time to actually do that. That's stuff I like to see. That's the detail. That's why I like making these type of videos. You can see when they did that, they even had to mill out a little bit of the back spacer to get clearance for that. Again, just good job. This should... I can't tell if that's 2 pieces or 1 piece there. I think it's actually 1 piece. But check it out, how it has the lip on there. Where the lip actually recesses into... Again, we'd have to put this on like this. Because this... So this actually like... That's a point of retention on there. This already doesn't want to move up and down. So the screws are not handling the stress of the up and down movement here. That's already covered inside the machining of just a backspacer. That's why when you talk about what are you actually getting for $375, you know, you're getting the details like that. Moving my stool around. I didn't fart on you guys. But anyways, it's a detail that you may not notice until somebody points it out to you. So good job on that. On a knife with this type of quality, I think it's important to go inside deep and let you know exactly what you're getting for the money. And again, I bought this knife with my own money. I'm not being paid to make this video. I am not a Microtech fanboy. I just want to let you know that it's really well made. Okay, so let's get into the front pivot section here. You can see how thick this pivot is. You can see it's put on a bushing. Let's go ahead and pull it out so you can kind of see some more of the internals here. Again, that spring is preloaded there. And you can see exactly what makes this opening. And you can see, if you watch the review, I think I said I understand why this knife is as wide as it is and as built as it is. And you can see even for the pivot, they couldn't ride this pivot flush. Why? Well, because they had to make all the space for this strong spring here. Look how there's like what, 4 coils on there, and it's a pretty thick spring. It really fires out that thick M390 blade hard. You can see how they put it on a bushing here, much like a SNG, not SNG, I'm sorry, Sabenza, you know. The Para 2 kind of has this design. There's a lot of knives using this design. The first time I had seen it is on the Chris Reeve knives. But you can see that bushing really helps create a free action. It has to be really precisely machined to fit inside this. Yeah, I'm going to flip this blade over so there's no slop in this. Do you know what I mean? Just good machining. Look at this pocket here. So your first look at this, you may think, man, that is a thick blade, and you're saying it's hard use, heavy duty, you know, overbuilt, and then they milled out this much of the blade and then widen that up. So really just that is the point of the strength, you know. The rest of the thickness is really just for show, you might think. But my argument to that would be, check out the wear on the knife. You can see that the wear is all the way out here. So let's look at the handle. There are no washers in this knife, which you may be a little shocked. But the spring is so strong that you don't notice it. It's a very smooth opening knife because it's, you know, side opening automatic. So, you know how most knives have a washer? This has a huge surface area that's actually contacting the blade on both sides, providing that side-to-side stability. So even if you pried with this knife, I would almost guarantee that this blade would break either here, right here where my fingernail is, and up, or the tip would break off it before the pivot would break. Because it's captured all the way around, you've got that much surface area providing the stability side to side. I really don't think there's much pressure getting put on the actual pivot portion of the blade, even under side to side stress. So I don't know. I think it is incredibly well designed, and they made it strong like that, even though it's an automatic, even though they had to mill this out to create room for that big spring to sit in there. So you can see how that just goes in there like that. Then this portion is preloaded onto that. So when you actually put this together, this comes down like this, and then you preload it like that. You see what I'm saying? The pivot fell out, but you can see where that's cut. That little cut right there. So it's a really well-designed knife. You can see that big spring also is milled out on that pocket. So you get a little bit of space here on the handle, and then you also get some space on the blade. The spring is only on one side. That's all that you need. And they're really simple. When you push down that plunge lock with the spring on it, this is always under tension and always wants to be out. So when you push the button down, it releases that from the underneath, right? Pushes down, and this blade's always under spring tension, so it snaps open. And then this is cut out here, and the plunge lock comes out and locks it up. And then they also left room for the wear. So as this knife wears down, this can come out now, and that will provide, hopefully, no blade play up and down. And I don't think it's going to move a whole lot, again, because of how well that this is captured around the pivot. I think you might see some movement if this was square and this was round. Again, a good example that might be this. That was one of my criticisms of the Sleech Bowie. See how that's flat up against a round pin? Now, luckily, this hasn't moved at all. So maybe my argument is not even something to even take note of. But I like to see it not flat. I would rather have this wrap around that stop pin like this does. So there you go. I just really wanted to point that out, that this, all of these standoffs here, look, you have this 4 points of retention here, really 5 when you get the pivot in there. And then this is actually milled. This is the female. That's the female, that's the male side. And they actually register like that. So even with no screws, when this knife is just held together like this, you really, with precision machining, there's not really, it's already held together. Do you know what I mean? So any forces on this knife going side to side, if you were prying with it, which I wouldn't recommend prying with a blade with that skinny of a tip. But as a hard use cutting tool, it's strong. Very strong. The plunge lock, I feel, is a great design. It's one of the better options for automatic knives, you know, side swinging automatics. I don't know what the actual strength test would be if you can hop that plunge lock out of place and cause a lock failure. I don't know. I haven't spine whacked it or anything like that. But I haven't had a problem, you know. So there you go. You get a lot of machining that's going on inside of this knife. Incredibly well designed. You can see it's a thick piece of aluminum. The machining is, again, just incredible. I like the attention to detail here. I love the clip. I don't know if I talked about that too much in the review. There's no hot spots. They have rounded off the corners. This is flat, has a lip leading into your pocket. I love how they recess that down into there. And again, lots of detail. Look how they even chamfered the edge on the back spacer. There's no reason to do that, but they did it. You know, it's extra tooling wear for something that really isn't that needed, but it's cool that they did it on the underneath. Obviously on the back portion that you see. I like that the cutaway here, when you put the lanyard in, it's not going to be puffed out the side. A good example that I have on hand right here is this. You see how wide this gets here? With this type of cutaway with the handle, the lanyard is flush with the handle when it's pulled back. Again, good job. Beefy screws on this thing. You get a pivot bushing. You get a big heavy-duty spring. Look how thick this pivot is. It's a captured pivot, so the knife doesn't loosen up and lose its tension as you carry and use it. I've never had to adjust it. After it's set, it's set. You could actually use a little bit of Loctite. Use the blue, the temporary Loctite on it, because you want to be able to get it out later. But it's going to be captured, and it also has a screw end on both sides. So maybe use some light Loctite, but you're not going to have a problem. It's a fun knife. I like the machining on it. I like the attention to details. Again, you got the thick screws. I love doing this style video where we can just go down deep and look at every single little detail of the knife on the inside. See if it's actually worth the price tag. See if there's anything maybe they could have done a little better. I don't have any criticisms on the internals of this knife. Very well done. I don't see how you could have done it better. So that's just is what it is. This is the knife Spelunking. We will do more knives. Maybe we will take down the Ultratech one day. Maybe we'll pick another knife and just do some Spelunking on it. So that's it. I appreciate you guys hanging out. See ya.